Hello everyone, this is OG. Nice to have you all again. Today we're going to have a very interesting topic, and I have a very interesting guest today from WRK.com, the CEO of the company. We're going to talk about something that normally you don't hear a lot, which is automation and AI for the SMBs. Normally, we tend to focus either on the B2C side for people to do work and arm work, or B2B side, we typically tend to focus on large enterprises. Today, we're going to talk about this very interesting area that is, how do we take all those technology and embed them inside companies that are small and medium? So, Mo, nice to have you today. Nice to talk about this topic with you. Maybe have a quick intro for the audience here, please.
Sure thing. It's very nice to be on your show, Olivier, and yeah, looking forward to talk about automation and all things SMBs. So just by way of background, work.com was started, so WRK.com was started almost 6 years ago to really help cover a gap that was left unfulfilled specifically for small, medium-sized businesses that were interested in the idea of automation, that perhaps felt like some of the tooling in the market was either too basic or way overcomplicated and overkill for some of their business needs. And so for the last 6 years, what we've done is we really built a piece of software that would help organizations create digital versions of their internal processes using a library of pre-built Microsoft robots. And we'll get into all of that. But the thing that we love the most is how can we really help simplify the lives of business operators so that they can keep on running their business day in and day out and not really have to worry about fiddling around with, configuring tools and so forth.
Exactly. So remember that the idea here is not to go really deep into the technology, but instead to focus on the impact of the technology, the use cases, and the outcome that we are able to get from this technology. So again, the audience that we are aiming at today is really the SMBs, and we're going to start by trying to define what we mean by automation and AI or business process automation, right? Because very often people don't really understand what this is and what it means. So could you try to define in simple terms what BPA is?
Yeah. So really put yourself in the lens of the or the shoes of the business operator. You're running a company, you've got a number of employees. If you're an SMB, we'll probably say you've got anywhere from five all the way maybe to 100 employees. Let's just say that that's the range that we're going to be operating in. And so in any given day, you're coming into the office, you've got deliverables for your clients, you've got back office admin things that you've got to do, whether it's processing invoices or, shuffling around documents that need to be shipped somewhere, or dealing with the requirements from clients that are coming in. And so every day there's just sort of busy work that keeps your team busy. And so how are you going to address it more often than not in the SMB world? It's been the same solution for hundreds of years. Hire more people so they can produce more work. With the advent of what we're seeing now with automation solutions that exist in the marketplace, I'm sure some of you have probably already played with AI in a variety of different means. How can we use some of these technologies that are now sort of pervasively available everywhere to start developing solutions to get rid of this busy work that's happening every day? So for me, business process automation is pretty simple. It's how do you take something that is repetitive, that your team does every single day, and then delegate that responsibility to a piece of software so that it can do it on your behalf. And I want to sort of really gear our conversation today around the concept of not boiling the ocean. Meaning, we can try and think about automation as, oh, I need to replace everything that my team does. That's not the way to think about it. It's really how do we take it so that it amplifies and helps deliver these results more by more, and little by little, so that your team just has a little bit less and then a little bit less, and then hopefully a lot less to do over time. That to me is what business process automation is.
Yes, indeed. And it's very important as well to remember that when we are trying to inject technology inside a work environment, we are not always looking for extremely complex, extremely at the edge of the technology type of solution, right? Because very often, what is eating up our bandwidth are a list of very mundane tasks, starting from, frankly, copy and paste, right? It could be something as simple as I'm doing far too many copy and paste, and I'm trying to address that. So, as you said, right, we are not here trying to boil the ocean. Of course, sometimes you go and you deploy more advanced solution, but it start the baseline, the the foundation of automation can be very basic and yet very often not correctly automated in most of the companies, right?
Yeah, and I'd like to also sort of put the audience at ease. This isn't exclusively an SMB problem. This is actually a business-wide problem. Without naming names, we were dealing with a major airline carrier in their cargo division, and their process that they needed to automate, which was sort of tracking the shipment status of certain cargo shipments. That was a process internally that had a Google Excel or an Excel spreadsheet, a Zendesk link, a bunch of emails, and some website that they had to log into to go get status updates. So these problem sets that exist in the SMB world are just as big as they are in, the large enterprise world. And it's all the same. It's exactly what you mentioned. It starts with simple things, copy, paste, getting information from a system, making sense of information across different screens, and then collating all this information together.
So when we deploy those technology inside an environment, what is typically the expected benefit?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost is really to think about efficiency. It's, having your team have one less thing to do that they don't have to otherwise worry about. Again, I think the most important thing is to really empathize with the user, to empathize with the employee who's coming in on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, maybe even over the weekend, and having to do the same thing over and over again. What if we could take one and just make it so they don't have to another and then another and then another. What this ends up doing is twofold. Number one is it just creates incredible efficiency internally because that employee now no longer has to worry about, oh, I know every hour on the hour I have to go and do something. Like that's one less thing to do. The second thing is it opens up their opportunity or their ability to do more worthwhile work. You want to have your employees do higher value tasks for you, be able to engage more with your clients or your users, or be able to do more creative type of work and tasks or more strategic stuff, right? And then the third thing is there's also an element of cost saving, right? You will need to hire less people over time to produce a growing volume of work. And so efficiency, it's for me, it always starts with efficiency, and then it leads into cost savings, and then it leads into revenue expansion, and then it leads into innovation. Those are usually the four key things that we see with automation.
Yes, 100%. So it's both bottom line and top line that we are addressing at the same time when we are correctly uh, identifying and addressing those use cases. So talking about use cases, let's try to focus on real world examples. Let's try to identify a number of areas that would be very tangible for people to understand in a given context, in a given company's environment, what it is that those technologies are doing. If we take a case study, if we take an example in a given industry, in a given department inside a company, if you could maybe try to highlight a couple of examples for people to really picture practically what it means.
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you one that's sort of broad-based that almost everybody has a problem with, and then one that's a little bit more, or a couple that are perhaps a little bit more specific to the outcome that the businesses wanted to do. Um, so in thinking about automation, there's again sort of wide spectrum problem set. So the wide spectrum problem set that we see almost everywhere is in the finance department. Everybody, every single company, I don't care who you are, you're dealing with invoices in one way, shape, or form. All right. Well, so how do invoices come in the form of an SMB? Well, you probably have a bunch of invoices that are coming in over email. someone in your finance team is opening up these emails saying, okay, there's a PDF to pay for this invoice, there's a Word document, there's a link. They're taking this information, they're probably logging into QuickBooks or Sage or Xero or whatever accounting software they're using. They're looking for the vendor. They're probably using Slack or Microsoft Teams or whatever communication tool to then ask the person who requested the product or service whether it's okay to process this invoice. Then they go back into QuickBooks. So it's sort of like the same standard flow everywhere. And so a standard use case automation there is let's just automate invoices. So that's a bot that would live in your email inbox. Every single time an invoice comes in, automatically logs into your accounting software, checks for the vendor, checks if there's a purchase order, for instance, automatically sends a message on Slack or Microsoft Teams. Is this approved? Yes or no? And then it can then apply business logic rules. So for example, any invoice under $500 automatically process. Over 500, verify with this person. Over 1,000, verify with that person. And so immediately right there, the average saving that we see is anywhere from 100 to 250 employee hours per year in just processing invoices for an SMB. Like that's pretty material. Now you may think that that's like very basic, but imagine just saving 200 employee hours a year off of this one simple mundane task, right? So that's simple, that's pretty straightforward, and there's a myriad of ways of solving that with automation. So that's broad-based. In terms of like application specific, we've really seen the gamut of it all, but there's a couple that I think would be really interesting to highlight. One is everything around automation of documents. And so a lot of clients and a lot of companies in general automate things like producing shipping documents, for example, if you're, an e-commerce or you ship products, right? Perhaps you're dealing with reports for your clients that need to be produced. Perhaps you're producing, so we deal a lot with non-for-profits, so producing tax receipts for tax season. It's tax season right now, so we're producing these documents. If you're receiving requirements from clients, whether it's in PDF or whatever, extracting that information from the document. If you're dealing with invoices, again, extracting information from these invoices or these purchase orders. So reading and producing documents in an automated way, really, we do a ton of these and we see a lot of requirements. So again, that's one less thing that your team would have to do. And again, it doesn't have to solve 100% of the process beginning to end, but maybe say it solves 20, 30%. That's like the annoying bit. We
Yeah.
had a use case where a client receives a lot of what we call or what they call RFPs, requests for proposals. So they get inundated with these. That's usually like anywhere from a 5 to a 30-page PDF document that someone has to read, extract requirements, figure out when they have to submit it by, and so forth. So what we did is automation to automatically read the information from the RFP, use AI to help prioritize that for their sales team so they can know which RFP they have to answer to first, right? So that's just like one less thing that just optimizes and creates efficiencies, right? So that's sort of like a second use case.
Yeah,
The
if I may, before you go into the last example, one point that is really important that you said is the fact that automation is not black and white. It's not either I do nothing or I do everything, right? You can automate partially the process, 20, 30, 40, 50% of the process, and yet reap the benefit of that automation, right? So it's not, I got to automate 100%. You are aiming at automating 100%, and over time you might, go towards that goal. But if you start and you just automate 20, 30, 40%, it's already a huge impact. And there's a business case just within those 20, 30%, right?
Completely agree. Completely agree. And again, I think you coined it or really, really well here. The amount of efficiency that you get, even by just automating 1%, it just compounds over time. It's like interest, right? And so
Yep.
over time, your team keeps on benefiting. And then you sort of like get addicted into this bug of then you've entered this automation journey, which now you're really thinking about it in this coefficient of efficiency. The third use case that I would see that we're starting to see really a lot of is, especially in the SMB space, is often there are systems that you wish could talk to each other just a little bit better, and they don't, natively at least, right? And so, we had a use case recently of a company that wanted to use this platform called Paylocity with Service Titan. So they use Service Titan to schedule and do all of the service calls and so forth for their fleet of service providers, and then they do Paylocity for the payment processing side of things. These systems kind of speak to each other, but not natively well enough. And so being able to build these sort of custom plugins to make systems that don't speak with each other well, to speak to each other well, to synchronize data and flows of information that don't usually flow with each other. That's just another massive, advantage gain by having finally a system of record that has all of your information by cobbling the information from the systems that don't speak to each other. So those would be like real practical examples, but we can, there are other areas that I think can be explored. But I think what's really important is to figure out where is the department in your organization that has the biggest bottleneck, right? And often, we come in with a certain assumption that it is going to be in sales or marketing operations or whatever. But often, like we were just meeting with a company, their big bottleneck is actually in recruiting. And so it was all around how do we optimize their HR processes so that they can leverage LinkedIn to do their job posting, use AI to match the job resumes being submitted with the job description, synchronize all of this in the applicant tracking system so that again they can prioritize and optimize their recruiters' teams or time rather.
Oh, that's amazing. So if we are looking at someone who wants to start, the idea here is to be able to articulate clearly what needs to be done to start in that direction. Starting by answering, probably the most obvious question, which is, hey, I'm an SMB. I don't have internally the skills to do that. And, I'm also concerned that it might take ages to implement this project. It sounds great. We just discussed, some use cases. Sounds great. I see opportunity inside my environment, but I am afraid that one, I don't have the skills. Two, it will take ages.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a very valid point. And the reality is, look, there's a lot of software vendors out there. There's a lot of different ways of automating. There's even ways of being able to use, if you're technical enough, to use AI to build custom software to do this thing for you. The question is, it's sort of a choose your own adventure. So, the advice to give SMBs here in terms of where to start is, well, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? The spectrum is you can go buy an off the shelf automation engine that you can use yourself to build your own custom automation and manage it. The challenge there is, the cost is acceptable actually. It's not that expensive to get up and running. It's just a challenge of managing that over time. It requires a little bit of a depth of technical skill set and then you just managing and maintaining that over time. So it's sort of like high value over time if you've got the willingness and the ability and the skill set to put in the work necessary to customize the thing for you. Then there's the opposite side of the spectrum, which is sort of where the work.com platform comes in, which is we'll just do all of the work for you. And so there is a means through which you can find vendors like us, and we're not the only ones, where you can go in and describe your process. It'll get automated for you. You get an extension of an automation team that will help you manage this over time. And you will still also get access to the platform so that you can learn over time and then be able to become a self-service sort of like user of automation over time, right? I think that one of the great byproducts of people engaging so much with AI platforms like ChatGPT and Gemini and Anthropic and others is they've seen the capabilities and skill sets of some of these intelligent autonomous agents, which means that they're starting to realize that maybe I don't need to be as technical as I thought that I might have to be able to automate myself. And so there are, again, platforms like ours that enable you to be able to take advantage of that to be able to automate yourself. So automation shouldn't be a scary word. It is not a multi-months, tens of thousands of dollars in deployments. In fact, most of our clients are up and running in under a week, and most workflows will cost you less than a few $1,000s to get up and running and automated. So when you do the price comparison of the hundreds of employee hours that it saves you annually to spend $2,000 to $3,000 to automate, a process, I mean, I think the ROI is pretty clear.
Yeah, and that's really important to talk about this notion that you're not gonna be burning cash and not getting the return, right? So this is really important for people to realize that it is entirely possible, although when you look at it from the outside and you are not fully technical, fully knowledgeable, it looks very complex. Looks like you're gonna need many, many, many tools in order to automate. It looks like it will be very expensive. It will be difficult to implement, difficult to maintain, right? So this is really important here that we are able to stress that point that it is possible when you are using the right tool, the right platform, to do it with a very well managed, well controlled budget within, as you said, a week is extremely fast, right? People have in mind it would take me 6 months to do it. So could you maybe try to, according to your experience with your clients and the market, um, do we need, very expensive tools? Do we need many tools? Or is there possibility, option, solution to have a place where you select the platform, you get everything from it within a reasonable price and time frame?
Yeah, look, I think there's actually, we're going through a pretty significant transformation in the technological ecosystem in general, in that previously, you had to have an ERP and then a CRM and then all of your productivity tools and so forth. I think the world is starting to consolidate because predominantly of AI and automation. And so I think if you're an SMB today, you really need to think about your operating stack. What are the things that you really need to be able to deliver the outcome that you need for your clients? And so let's say you run a plumbing shop and you've got, I don't know, maybe five or a few locations. And so you probably need some form of a fleet management software just to manage your plumbers' times and access. You need some form of like a book, appointment booking software. Usually they're all, like Service Titan is a great example of that. And then a payment processing, engine. So like that already covers everything, right? Then everything else is probably going to be communications protocol over email, phone calls, and then billing, right? So that's your accounting software. So if you look at previously, you used to have like a customer success, management software like Zendesk, and then, the booking thing, and then your accounting software, and then your email communication. So I think you're going to start seeing that you can actually start consolidating and minimizing the number of software tools. So step number one for me would be really ask yourself, what is the operating stack that I need to use to really have the most comprehensive set of functionalities that I need. And then thereafter, honestly, everything else can be solved with automation. So if you think about the life cycle, so what I encourage our clients to do, or prospects to do as well, is sit down with a pen and a paper and map out the journey of your customer, right? So if I'm a plumber, well, someone's finding me online or through some of the marketing that I'm doing. They're calling in or submitting a request for an appointment. They're describing what their problem is. We're calling them to book a meeting. And then sort of like we're sending the plumber, they do the work. And then, we send them the invoice. Then either they pay or we chase them to pay. And then maybe we try and remarket them for other things in the future. And once you've mapped all of this out on a piece of paper, just sort of like your client's journey, then let's figure out what is the piece of software that would enable you to have the predominant majority of these functions or actions performed in one platform. And then everything else, let's start thinking about how do we automate these steps, right? So, for example, we just rolled out recently an AI voice agent. And if you haven't checked out voice agents, you absolutely should, because the voice agents are like really incredible these days to be able to book the service appointments on your behalf. So when someone submits a request on your website, we'll call them right away. Hi, you just submitted a request for a plumber. What's the best available time? I know that you think that people still like to do the things online. They don't. They still want to do things on the phone, especially for these types of service calls. And more often than not, home services types of businesses struggle with keeping up with the volume of phone calls, right? So then that's where you start covering in the gap. So minimize the number of software that you need to use, solve everything else with automation, be more automation forward and AI forward. And that's really going to transform your business completely from a efficiencies perspective.
Yes, fully agreed. And in the automation space, exactly the same, right? So people are a bit more technical listening to us. They might say, okay, I need an AI tool, I need an automation tool, I need an OCR tool, I need something for API, I need this, I need that. I would say in those cases, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, right? So if you can have a one-stop shop where you can go and get everything to do to automate the use cases that you are targeting, this is even better, right? Simplicity is really what we need to aim for here, and not to get lost into very complex setup that ultimately will not yield ROI.
Yeah, yeah, precisely. The other bit too that I think is really interesting that's happening in the space is I think most, because we were talking about pricing previously, Most small, medium-sized businesses are also very price sensitive and price conscious, and that rightfully so, right? I think every dollar here makes a material impact on the bottom line of those businesses. And so starting to pick vendors that have a differentiated pricing model, I think is pretty important. The software industry is going through a transformation right now. Work.com chooses to charge a transactional consumption-based model, which means that you pay per outcome. You pay per unit of result that we deliver. You don't pay a monthly subscription fee or an annual fee or anything like that. And the reason we do it is because it's just for us, it's more honest. We deliver your work, you pay for it. We don't deliver your work, you don't pay for it. And so you're not, if your shop is closed, for the Christmas break, why are you paying for a monthly license that you're not using? And we're not the only ones. Many other software vendors are starting to move in that direction as well. So start being more discerning with who you choose as your software vendor because it'll just make you a lot more efficient and optimize your costs as well.
Yeah, and to that point, this outcome-based mindset, outcome-based pricing is extremely interesting, especially when we know that in some areas in the automation space, up to 50, 60% of the licenses that have been acquired by company are sitting on the shelf. So, this is basically clearly saying that you will end up uh, not fully maximizing your investment. So this approach of pay as you use or outcome-based pricing is definitely the way to go.
Yeah, yeah, completely. And I think you can also start being more uh more demanding of your software vendors because I think they're starting to realize that the power is starting to revert back to the consumer. The other thing too that I think is going to be starting to be a bit of a trend is um, using organizations that have sophisticated AI to build custom software for you again. So I feel like we're sort of like making a bit of a weird go back. Remember when you used to go to the store and buy a CD with Microsoft Word and that you would own it forever? I think that world is coming back a little bit. So I would encourage the SMBs to also think about what pieces of software do I use today that maybe aren't worth this sort of like monthly or annual price that I pay, that I could maybe go and invest maybe 20, $30,000 to build or rebuild completely for my own custom needs, because now the custom dev shops are significantly better suited, more, aptly priced because now you can code with AI. So you're still getting a really strong outcome, but for a much, much cheaper, price point.
Yeah. Okay, so let's now talk about trying to share experience back to our audience, right? So there's typically a number of mistakes or lesson
Hmm.
that we have all learned by doing, working with clients and doing automation. And this is something that is really, really important when you are starting your journey or you are stuck because you have difficulty to scale. Uh, Sharing, lesson learned is something that will help people avoid all the troubles, all the scars, all the delays, all the failed ROI, right? So, do you have anything here that you would like to share that are the typical issues that you see again and again, and that you keep advising people again and again, right? Just to share to the audience here.
Sure. Yeah. Like really, it's three things, but there may be a few more. But number one would be, do you like really know what it is that you're trying to automate? And if you don't, then what you really need is a discovery process with a consulting firm, right? Someone to really come and help you really get a more holistic view of your business, understand where the gaps are, do the hard work with your team to analyze what's missing, right? So there's a difference between you wanting to automate because you're excited about its potential and you knowing what processes you need to automate. So start and just be honest with yourself. And if you don't know, there's nothing wrong with it, right? It just means you need to sort of like start one step earlier. So there's a bunch of like really great, automation consulting companies. Certainly you're one of them, to help people figure out what those issues are. The second bit is once you've identified and honed in on, okay, the problem set I'm trying to solve is lead generation, it's invoice processing, it's delivering this type of outcome for my client, or it's this team that has a pile of this specific task that they need to do that I need to help them with. Once you've done that, really take the time to map it out because you think you know the process. And depending on where your job function is within the organization, typically the higher up you are, the more disconnected you are from the actual day-to-day of the
Yes.
process. So bring the person who's pulling their hair every day, who's doing the job to really help you map out the process. Because in order for the automation to be successful, not only do we need to know the process in detail, we need to know the edge cases, the exceptions. What happens when Mary is not at her desk and someone needs to ask a question and she's on vacation for 3 days? What happens when the system where we go and get this order is down, right? So thinking about all these edge cases and exceptions are going to be really, really key. And simultaneously to this, those people that run the day-to-day business process are the ones that also have access to the systems that the automation team is going to need to automate the process. So often we'll start automating and then we'll need, okay, by the way, we need access to the system. Oh, whoops, we don't know where the username and password is, or we don't know, or it's tied to this person's login or whatever, right? So really getting in with the people that have that process. So that would be number two. And then number three, get really, really clear on what success means for you. Like what will make you happy? Because sometimes people come in with this idea that this thing is just going to completely replace their team doing it. And often it's not immediately the case, or it may not be necessary even, right? It may be that you actually need your team to do the entire process beginning to end, but the three middle steps are the parts they really don't want to do, right? So let's hone in on what success means so that we can both be set up for success and that you can be happy with the outcome. So I'd say those are really the three major things. Like make sure that you are really clear as to whether you know what you're trying to automate or you're just trying to automate. And then if you're not, then hire someone to help you with it. Two, get access to the people who are doing the thing, right? Doing the process and have access. And then number three, is just be really clear on what success means for you so that you can be happy with the result.
Yes, fully aligned. I say all the time, right, that before you start running, you need to know in which direction, right? Because very often people get over excited about a new shiny object, a new tool, and they start playing with the technology without knowing, why or what they are trying to achieve. So we are, fully aligned here. And I think that it is also important, as you said, to understand and to remember that once you introduce automation in your environment, you're going to have some sort of digital workforce and human workforce coexisting, working together. Maybe the
Mm.
ratio will evolve over time. More work will be done by digital workforce, but you're going to have a new balance. And this is important for people to understand that one is not replacing the other, right?
Yeah, completely. In fact, we were just speaking with a car mechanic shop. It's a franchise model. And so we are speaking with one of the franchisors that owns, I believe, three locations. And he called not because he just wanted to create efficiencies internally, but because he wanted to start growing by acquiring other garages. And his thing is the ratio of mechanics to office admins or back, the people that do all the paperwork and stuff is 1 to 1. And so in his mind is if I can get it to 2 to 1, where I have two
Yeah,
mechanics per
it's okay,
one,
of course.
brilliant, right? Now I can start acquiring all these other garages in a profitable manner. So this is just like think about AI and automation as truly as sort of this catalyst for growth as well. If you can optimize yourself, it means you can grow in a multitude of different ways and like really start to produce, bigger top line as well.
Okay, so last topic here, which is for me a very important topic, which is everything related to this change of mindset, this change of culture, frankly, the fear that sometimes we see inside organization when we are introducing automation and we are not explaining, positioning, and articulating what that change is, right? So let's try to spend a little bit of time here to quickly articulate what we feel needs to be done in order to work around that and establish the right mindset, the right culture in a company willing to automate their process.
Yeah, I think you need to first off stop leading with fear. Right. I think this idea of coming in to say automation and AI is going to, move people out of your workforce or to get rid of your employees. Look, some people believe that that's right and that's the thing they want to do, but then you're going to have a lot of resistance internally because if you're leading with this message of I'm bringing in automation to replace my people, well, then the people doing the work aren't going to want to give you the details of the process or really be helpful in it, right? And so I think you have to be more diligent with your approach of how to manage this change control internally and express that this is being brought in to help optimize the workforce and create efficiencies and actually be honest that that's your objective. That should be your objective is to, really help optimize and create efficiencies internally in your team. Once you've helped convinced your team that that's the case and sort of like made them feel hopefully safe that you're not in it to try and replace their task, but rather to help grow the organization, and you've got their buy-in, don't boil the ocean. Start with honestly 1%. What, like this 1% mindset? What is one thing that I could improve that will improve my organization by 1% more? And then just do that every week, right? Like, or every month.
Yeah.
If you can optimize your workforce 1% at a time on a compounding scale over the spectrum of multi-week, all of a sudden your company is significantly a lot more optimized. Your team is happier, they're producing more outcome. And then you have the choice of either taking on more work, or if you so choose, you can actually start, reducing your workforce for those people who do not adapt to the upgraded version of your organization.
Yeah. And I think this is really important to of course communicate and articulate the value that the technology will bring, of course, to the revenue, to the company, but also to the employee by augmenting their capability and frankly, even increasing their market value if they ever want to change job, right? Because now they are AI augmented, they are automation friendly, and also to clearly articulate that when you are introducing technology, this is not a project. This is a transformation of your operating model. This is not something that you start and then 2 weeks later you are done with it and that's it, right? You are basically starting a new way of delivering by relying on machine to augment human, to boost productivity, to increase revenue to employee ratio. And this is going to be a journey that will never stop, right? This is really important for people to understand.
Yeah. I forget who coined it, but they said that people aren't going to be forced out of their workforce by an AI. They're going to be forced by another human who knows how to use AI. And
100%.
so this is about upskilling your team so that they know how to use these tools better. And by bringing in, capabilities within the workforce that make it so that they're not wasting outrageous amounts of hours doing copy paste, logging into a bank account and downloading statements, logging into, a call center software and listening to voice recordings to figure out if a client is happy or dissatisfied or producing a document or like these are just simple mundane things that we should absolutely get rid of immediately so that you can really optimize your workforce. And you owe it to them to optimize them with these technologies today.
Great, fully aligned. So, was great talking to you, Mo. Very exciting topic, automation AI for SMB. Was great to have you on the show. If you have any question, DM us. We'll be happy to get back to you. Thanks, Mo, for being on the show. Have a great day and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Olivier. Bye-bye.
Bye.